MacuHealth is a nutritional supplement leader. Our targeted formulas include MacuHealth for daily eye health, MacuHealth Plus for aging eye support, Vitreous Health for vitreous care, Vision Edge Pro for visual performance in athletes, TG Omega-3 for ocular and systemic wellness, and MacuHealth DM for eye and metabolic support. Call MacuHealth today and mention this podcast for special discounts. Experience the difference with MacuHealth. Nutrition you can see.
With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Do your patients know what presbyopia is?
There are people who are afraid of the press.
Have you talked to your patients about multifocal contact lenses?
I've heard the bifocal, but not multifocal.
Exactly, not multifocal.
Do you need help with your multifocal strategy? Learn more at the conclusion of this episode. Welcome to the Dr. Kerry-Gell Wellness Podcast, where science meets wellness and vision leads to vitality. I'm Dr. Kerry-Gell. Be sure to visit my new website, wellness1280.com, where you'll find all guest links, resources, and previous episodes. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So reach out to me at drkerrygelb@gmail.com. Now sit back and enjoy today's episode with the modern day Dr. Spock, pediatric integrative expert, Dr. Elisa Song. Why are so many kids today struggling with chronic health issues, asthma, obesity, allergies, mental health disorders? Nearly 1 in 4 children in the U.S. faces at least one chronic health condition. Even more concerning, 1 in 4 teenage boys has prediabetes or diabetes, and 35% of kids between the ages of 10 and 17 are overweight or obese. Mental health, 20% of adolescents report experiencing major depression in the past year. Is this a modern crisis? What has changed over the past 50 years? Today, we have the country's leading integrative pediatrician, Dr. Elisa Song, MD, a doctor who has helped thousands and thousands of children heal from the inside out, from chronic infections and eczema to ADHD, anxiety, and autoimmune disease. She has guided parents toward real solutions using integrative and functional medicine. Dr. Song has spent over 20 years speaking at top integrative and functional medicine conferences, sharing her experts with not only parents, but also practitioners alike. And now she's here to help us with some powerful insights. She's also the author of the must-read book, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, a guide to raising resilient, thriving children in today's world. Dr. Song, welcome to the Dr. Kerry-Gell Wellness Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
I'm really excited to speak with you today. We have a very similar philosophy about things. I remember when my oldest son was, I don't know, maybe he was 7 months, maybe 5 months, and my wife was freaking out that he wasn't turning over. So I'm sure you get a lot of worried parents with milestones. Tell us about some of the milestones that people come into you that they're worried about that typically aren't anything to worry about. And then part 2, some that are something to worry about.
Well, you nailed one of them. I mean, one of the first things is really the rolling over. And, typically, so I went to medical school back in the mid 90s and, finished up my pediatric residency in the late 90s. So I've been at this for a while. And the milestones that we looked at were typically around 4 months of age. Babies should be rolling, on their tummies from the front, pushing up and rolling to their back. And around 6 months of age, they should be rolling both directions, so front to back and back to front. And that's when we start really watching them because they could roll over and over and over off of a surface. Now, what's happened, really as a result of our Back to Sleep campaign to reduce the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, babies are spending much more time on their backs. And if you think about how do we see babies mostly out and about in the world, we see them in their car seats or in their strollers, on their backs. And so not really having a lot of tummy time practice. And in fact, I have some families who come in and say that their babies just hate tummy time, so they don't actually put them on tummy time much. But what tummy time does is help them get that push up motion to strengthen their upper bodies and so that they can turn around. And then when they're on their backs, they can then do their little crunches and play with their toes and get the strength to roll over the other way. So we have not, with that awareness, there's been more of a push to make sure that parents are incorporating tummy time at earlier and earlier ages and making sure that kids are, on the ground, playing, looking at their toys instead of, being on their backs all the time. So, do I worry if children are not rolling from front to back or back to front, quite at the 4 month or the 6 month mark? I don't, unless, I mean, there's a couple of caveats. I do want them to do that at some point, right? But I also make sure that I encourage tummy time, put them up on the breastfeeding pillow, the boppies. I don't even know if that's still around anymore, but that was what I used when when my kids were nursing, to really make sure that we're giving them the opportunities to develop those skills. Now the other thing that kind of goes along with that is maybe the crawling or the walking. I'm seeing some kids not necessarily crawling right at around the 9 month age, mark where we typically have expected, and walking around the 12 month mark. Now, there's a range. So crawling, can be occur anywhere between 9 to 11 months of age, and then walking maybe 12 to 15 months of age. And so what I'm seeing is many kids doing that on the later end of the age norms. But I do pay attention to that because I want to make sure that babies have that opportunity, that we're having them on the ground, helping them learn to, cross their arms and their legs and using their crossing the midline of their bodies so that they're getting the brain development on both sides and also, getting the opportunities to move. What's more concerning to me is I really, really watch language development. Okay, so that's where, by around 12 months of age, we expect babies to be saying mama and dada or papa specifically to mean their mom or their dad, and then maybe one more word, something that's a favorite word. If they have a ball, they might be saying ba for ball, or if they have a dog, they might be saying da, but it's the same sound that we know that they recognize that there's that association. By 15 to 18 months of age, we're expecting more words, anywhere from 10 to maybe even up to 50 words, by around 18 months of age. So if babies are not really developing language in an appropriate way, I watch that closely, and I actually have a low threshold to refer to, for evaluations for infant speech therapy because I want to make sure that that's occurring appropriately. Again, sometimes it is a matter of just really making sure that we are giving babies opportunities to practice their language. And one of the things that can be very helpful is for us as parents. I mean, let's face it, in our modern world, we're so busy and multitasking and doing all the things. And oftentimes, even when we, are with our babies, we're, returning texts or emails on the side, or, we might be, while we're taking them for a stroll on a phone call, whether it's with work or, with a friend. And so, we want to step back and make sure that we are, using those opportunities to have that monologue with our babies. Like constantly, oh, wow, do you see the yellow bird in the tree? That's a yellow bird. What does a bird say? And just, that kind of monologue that we would have had if we didn't have our phones with us, right? We'd be constantly talking with our babies. And so that's one thing. And then, of course, there are many, concerns around speech delays. And, we know that there's a rise in the autism spectrum disorders. And that's why I watch that more closely. So first, making sure that parents are modeling, having a lot of interaction, singing, talking, reading. And then if they're still not, language progressing in the way we'd like to, then for sure referring so that we can just make sure, is it that, they're working on some of their other skills and language is just coming along at a slower pace, or are there true delays?
For crawling, they used to say that if kids don't crawl, that go straight to walking, there's an increased risk of learning disabilities. Is that something that is still thought, or has that been debunked?
I mean, there is again that cross patterning and learning how to use both sides of your brain and connecting. I think there is something to that. Now, I will say in my clinical experience, and again, I've been practicing for the past 21 years. I haven't really seen a clear correlation. I mean, if babies aren't crawling, I don't automatically assume, oh my gosh, you're gonna have learning problems and we have to ensure that they crawl. But I guess also for me as an integrative pediatrician, I am supporting families really fully with diet and lifestyles to make sure that development occurs in an appropriate way. So I suppose if my practice were maybe more conventional, that might not be the case, but I do think there is something to that. I don't think it's completely, I don't know what you'd call it, an urban legend. I think we do want babies to, be crawling and doing that cross motion and, reaching from right to grab something over on their left.
And kids that walk late, like 17, 18 months, is there any correlation with them being less athletic, poorer at sports, or doing worse in school scholastically?
I haven't noticed a correlation with doing worse in school necessarily. Are they the kids who maybe will have a little bit, less coordination, less strength, less agility when they're older? I do tend to see that. Again, it's not across the board, but it's so fascinating when I look at babies. Of course, their development is so interrelated, but we look at gross motor, crawling, walking, running. We look at fine motor, picking up little things, feeding self, and then we, of course, look at the social and the language development. And what I often find is that babies their brains tend to focus on one thing at a time. So I see some of the kids they are the ones who are crawling at 6 months and walking at 9 months, and they're, uh, doing a scooter at 18 months. And you're like, whoa, this kid is really so agile. And I guess, for lack of a better word, you would say, oh, wow, they're more, quote, athletic. But oftentimes their language is a little bit normal but behind, right? As opposed to the kids who are speaking sentences at 15 months. And I mean, just this, you can see their brains, connecting the dots in terms of language and communication. They may be the ones who are not as active. So, and I do see, I'm just trying to think of some of the kids in my practice. I do see some of the kids who were a little bit later to crawl or walk. They may not be as agile when they're older. Now, some of that, I do look at what else is going on with their growth and physical development. Because for some kids who aren't as mobile and active, um, sometimes I look for something called mitochondrial concerns, right? And mitochondria, they're the powerhouses of our cells. I mean, for the listeners, every single cell in our body is fueled by mitochondria. They create cellular energy for us. And I'm not talking about the energy to, run around and be hyper. It's the energy to sustain. Right. And so for babies and for kids who have these subtle signs that their mitochondria may be a little more stressed, what I often see is lower muscle tone, especially in their core. So they tend to be the babies where we typically expect, I see babies with straight up posture that you're like, wow, they're sitting up nice and straight. But these are the babies who might be slumped over even at, 9 or 12 months of age. They're kind of rounded shoulders a little bit. They may be sitting instead of crisscross applesauce. They're sitting on their bottoms with their knees in front of them and their lower legs and feet out to the side. So what we call the W position, that's another sign of lower tone. They may, because mitochondria produce energy for our muscles, they may have a harder time pedaling a tricycle or learning how to pump on a swing. So they're all little signs that I look for to see, is this something that needs to be worked out more closely or supported, or is it just that this child, their temperament is such that they actually like to play on their own and and are content, and not the active kids.
MacuHealth, your science-born and tested solutions for visual performance, macular degeneration, and dry eye syndrome. New products coming soon. Embrace the science.
Well, but have you noticed that there may be a mitochondrial problem? I know with adults, they'll take methylene blue, we'll do CoQ10, but what would you do with a baby that you found that there might be a mitochondrial problem?
So, depends on the age. For toddlers and children, I do similar things. I will supplement with CoQ10, carnitine, sometimes ribose, um, antioxidants like glutathione. All those can support the mitochondria. Now, before I do that, if I really have a concern for mitochondrial dysfunction, I will do some testing. I'll order something like a urine organic acid test, and urine tests are going to be fairly, relatively easy on a kid. And depending on my level of suspicion, I will do some blood tests as well. So it just kind of, I will um, personalize the plan based on, whether I do testing or not and what supplements I recommend. But for a baby, the first thing is that I want to make sure they're getting enough protein. And so, when we're starting solids for babies, the recommendation now is to actually have animal proteins as first foods because of we know that babies around that 6 to 9 month of mark, they tend to decline in their iron stores and their zinc stores, and so we want to make sure that they get that from animal proteins, which can then, of course, support muscle formation, can support cellular energy. So I look at their diet and really see now if they are under 6 months of age and they're not haven't yet started solid foods, and they have lower tone, maybe poor suck at the breast or the bottle, or they're you can just tell they're a little bit more quote floppy. Those actually are the babies that I'm going to do more of a workup on, to make sure that I'm not missing something that is presenting at such a young age. But typically with mitochondrial dysfunction, I'm not talking about a genetic mitochondrial disorder. It takes a little time of, maybe getting sick a couple of times, or, diet starting to lag, that then we start to see, oh, okay, there's now the mitochondrial signs are a little more clear.
So is there CoQ10 that's made for babies, or do you're just opening up a CoQ10 and putting it like in the bottle?
Yeah, well, there really aren't different forms of the supplements. It's just knowing the right dosages.
Hmm.
Right. So, and again, have there been babies like, bottle or breastfed babies that I've started these supplements on? Not too commonly. It's mostly in the toddler age or the older kid age where I'm thinking about that. And so there are some liquid CoQ10s. There are some chewable CoQ10s. I mean, to be honest, there's not a great um, source of really high quality pediatric vitamins and supplements. I mean, I try to source the best ones, and sometimes we're left with using the adult supplement, but just making sure that we're dosing appropriately, whether it's cutting the tablets or, opening the capsule and just using, some of the powder in it.
Because I don't know if some of them come in a dropper. I used to give my son when he was little a dropper, but it was an immune formula. I think it was made by Designs for Health, and it was a immune formula that he would take. And same with
Yeah.
the omega-3s, I'd be able to give him that. But I've never seen a pediatric for mitochondria, so that's pretty interesting that you mentioned that. Now, you talked about growth. This is a really interesting topic to me. I'm very fascinated by this. You probably know Ken Berry. He's a famous medical doctor who's a carnivore. And I watched one of his podcasts and I heard him say, if I heard him correctly, basically, if you feed your kid carnivore and you said first food should be animal protein, you feed your kid carnivore, he's going to grow to his maximum height. That'll be the tallest that he'll be. Now, I don't know if you agree with that. I don't know if there's anything that, from your experience, but a lot of parents are worried that their kids aren't growing fast enough. They're not growing correctly. What could parents do to make sure that their kids grow to the height that they're predetermined, the maximum they could get to? if I'm saying
Yeah.
it correctly.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So a few things. I will back up and say that really for an infant and a child and a teenager's development, immune system development, brain development, hormone development, the most important foundation is a healthy gut microbiome. That is really key. And your gut microbiome needs plant-based foods to grow and thrive and produce all of the substances that we in turn as humans use to grow and thrive. And so I personally, do not recommend a carnivore diet for children. I don't, I also, on the flip side, for families who are vegan, I'm very, concerned about making sure that they're getting adequate amounts of, not just protein, but looking at micronutrients, iron, zinc, and also making sure they're getting the right amounts of amino acids and fats in their diet. So, on the flip side, I think that our gut microbiome needs plants though, right? I mean, our microbiota, there's trillions of microorganisms in our gut. And if we want to feed the right bacteria that then make vitamins for us, make neurotransmitters like serotonin for us, make short chain fatty acids like butyrate for us, which many people now know about the amazing powers of butyrate for anti-aging and brain and immune. Well, that requires our microbiome, our gut microbiome, those bacteria to feed on prebiotics, fiber in plant-based foods to produce those substances for us. And when we move towards a mostly animal-based diet, we risk our microbiome then being fed and the wrong kinds of bacteria, these gram-negative bacteria, starting to then feed on the protein, and then producing substances like ammonia and something called trimethylamine or TMA, which we know in adults is highly correlated with cardiometabolic disease. So anyhow, I could I could have a big conversation about that, but I think that plants are very, very important. Now, when we think about growth, yes, we definitely need protein, right? And it can be challenging in a purely vegetarian vegan diet to get enough protein, those substrates, those building blocks for our muscles, right? Now, what I tell kids, and my son's a teenager, my daughter's a teenager, and they are very, interested in becoming better soccer players. And so, they see, all of these people talking about protein this, protein that. And so my son now wants protein bars and protein shakes and protein everything. So what I tell my kids and also, my middle schoolers and high schoolers in the office is, yes, protein is absolutely important because they are the building blocks for your muscles. However, getting protein from your foods are going to be a much better source for building your lean muscle than, shoveling in just supplements. You have to eat real food. And then also what your muscles need for repair after a workout, and then recovery and building. So, we need to recover what's been broken down in your muscles by your workout, and then we need to repair. And what do we need to repair? We need antioxidants, which you can only find in colorful fruits and vegetables. So it cannot just be about the protein. So there's that. Um, Also sleep. Now, children and adults are chronically sleep deprived, and I definitely can be one of those at times, right? I mean, we all have moments where we have deadlines or exams or whatever it is, but for the most part, sleep is one of the most important priorities. I cannot emphasize that enough, and especially when it comes to growth, because our brain releases most of our growth hormone in our sleep. Our brain actually shrinks by about 60% in volume to be then bathed by, a special lymphatic system called the glymphatic system that helps to clear out all the toxins that have built up during the day, help to bring in nutrients. And so if we want our brain to grow and be as healthy as possible, we need sleep. If we also want to grow physically, we need sleep. And so kids who are not optimizing their sleep, and I do talk to teenagers about this because some of them will come in and say, hey, is there any way I could get a little taller? I'd like to make it on the basketball team, or, is there any way I could eke out whatever, another another inch or so. And, they're not going to do it if they don't get enough sleep. So that is really, really important. And then for the kids who are more sedentary, it's just like adults and women now in the menopausal range. What is the most important to maintain bone health? That's exercise, walking, running, trampoline, for our kids. So some of our kids are very athletic, but the vast majority of the United States are not, right? They're not moving enough. And that's gotten way worse since the pandemic with Zoom schooling and then the video games and just sitting all the time. I mean, I was so grateful when we went back in person because I just couldn't stand to sit anymore. It's just, and so, we all got too sedentary. But we need that pounding, that movement, to tell our bones, hey, you want to grow, right? We're going to keep growing and keep supporting a skeleton that is, requires us to be strong for all of this physical activity. So the food that we eat and then the sleep and the movement. I mean, it comes down to the foundations, and I can throw all the supplements I want, that you want. And maybe some supplements are going to be helpful and needed. But you have to get back to those foundations. Otherwise, it's going to be an uphill battle.
A lot of times parents will bring the kids about growth and the pediatrician will do different measurements and they'll say, well, they're going to be this tall or that tall based on these measurements, or they could grow taller. Tell me about that. Is there any validity to that?
There's some. I mean, there's something called a mid-parental height where you take, both the parents' height and then you do a calculation to figure out approximately how tall you expect this girl or this boy to be. I mean, and it's a slightly different calculation based on sex. So that, I mean, yes, I mean that can be an approximation. There's also this funny thing. I don't know if you've heard this, but there's this uh, um, thought that your height at 2 years of age
Uh-huh.
is approximately half of your adult height, right? So, a child who's
By
around,
that?
yeah, well, I mean, it is interesting because at two, we think 2 years of age, half your adult height, but many 2-year-olds are close to 3 feet tall. I mean, so they're 36 inches. So you double that, that's 6 feet, for a boy. So it is interesting. So I think that that is an approximation. Um, but I do, especially nowadays, where as you mentioned when we were first starting, there's so much chronic illness and chronic inflammation. And even if kids don't have a particular diagnosis, um, y- you can bet that most kids have some amount of inflammation just from living, day to day in our modern world. And that inflammation, when we think about it, our body needs to use its resources, its calories, its mitochondria to repair all of that inflammation. So the more energy is going to repair, the less energy is going to growth. That's very important to understand. And so, we want to make sure that we're reducing whatever sources of inflammation we have in our power. I mean, we can't necessarily control the air quality outside, but we can control whether or not, we smoke inside the house or, we use an air purifier that reduces particulate matter. There are things that we can mm, modify, even, given all of the modern stressors.
You think stretching, sometimes you'll see these little YouTube videos with kids say, well, if you stretch, or people say if you stretch a certain way, it can help you grow. Anything like hanging from a chinning bar, anything like that? You buy any of
Well, I mean, yes and no. I don't want kids hanging upside down for too long or,
that? This is
doing,
hanging like this even.
yes. I mean, yes, because I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is I'll see sometimes kids coming in over the years, and if let's say they're past puberty and we expect that they've really slowed down in their growth, maybe they have a little bit more left in them towards the end of high school, or even some will grow through college. But what I see from a structural standpoint is, because of screen time, whether it's homework or gaming or being on your phone, is this posture, right? Kind of slumped down, neck forward, and you're just, leaning like this, and even when they're sitting on a chair or when have them sit on my exam table, it's astounding how many like again, when you look at babies, they're sitting up nice and tall, apart from the ones that don't have some mitochondrial concerns. But most babies, their posture is really good. And then somewhere along the way, their shoulders start to round as kids. They start to lean over, right? And most of that is really from being on screen so much, I think, right? And so, I'll have kids come in who sit on my exam table, legs dangling off, and they're hunched over. And even as standing, I can see their hunched over position. And so when I go to listen to their chest, I will put my hand gently on their back and their chest and have them sit up nice and straight and focus on keeping their core tummy muscles tight. And many kids say, well, it kind of hurts to stay up. I can't stay up because their core muscles have gotten so weak and their back muscles have gotten so weak that they can do it for a little bit while I'm listening, but then they go right back to hunching over.
Mhm.
Right. And so even as and so, I mean, I'll make a joke, but it is actually true. When they go from hunch to sitting up straight, I mean, they've just grown 3 inches. Right. I mean, it's that structural, when you stretch out your spine, when you make sure everything is elongated, you will be taller. And the more we sit compressed and hunched over, the more our spine compresses and the more that can't change. I mean, that we just don't have the ability then to really straighten up.
Well, you see adults sometimes that they have their kyphosis, the kyphotic
Yes.
spark, and I guess that could lead to that watching video, looking at video games, and sitting on a computer all the time like this.
Oh,
It would be correct?
yeah, absolutely. And I do see, like, I have this one teenage girl who does have actual kyphosis, and a boy who's starting to develop a little hump there, and I let them know. I mean, at a certain point, you're not going to be able to reverse that.
Mhm.
At a certain point, your spine just gets that memory, and it gets stiff in that position.
So kids have to remember to walk with good posture and maybe take a break every 10 minutes if they're looking at the computers. I know for the eyes, we tell them every 20 minutes you got to get up, you got to walk around so you don't become more myopic. So
Yep.
it would also good for preventing kyphosis because nobody wants to walk around all hunched over when they become an adult.
No, and this goes for parents too. I mean, when I start talking about posture, I'll see parents all of a sudden sitting up in their chairs, and when they're talking to me. But we all have to be mindful of that because I mean, apart from maybe, I mean, the lucky few who move a lot during the day during their daily work hours. Many of us as adults, we're at a desk and for most of the day. I mean, walking to and from the break room or the bathroom, I mean, that might be a little bit of a break, but we're sitting a lot. And so as we're sitting, we just have to make sure that, and I look at how kids are sitting on their chairs. I talk to my kids about this all the time, that we have to sit more towards the end of our chair, our legs planted firmly and really back straight and focusing on our tummies, because otherwise we just will tend to slouch or to the side or whatever it is. But that posture is so important. If we think about it, for even optimal blood flow to our brain. I mean, if you're making all of your blood vessels more crooked, it's a less direct path to your brain. Oxygen is going to flow more easily into your lungs. We're just going to have better focus. And also, there's something to be said about the psychological aspect of standing up nice and tall. When we stand hunched over, and I'll have kids do this too, just sit in the office or stand in the office hunched over looking down, right? You start to feel like a little bit not quite as confident or secure, right?
Right.
If we stand up nice and tall and straight, even if you feel nervous inside, your body starts to get this, sense that, okay, I have more confidence, and you can just do things a little bit more with a little bit more ease, right? It's even how we view other people. If you saw a teenager walking towards you hunched over with a hoodie over their head looking at their phone, what's your assumption about that teenager, right? As opposed to a teenager who comes straight to you, shoulders back, making eye contact, hi Dr. Gelb, right? It's very different. And and some of these kids, they're such great kids, they don't realize how their body posture is affecting how other people interact with them.
The best way to make them realize is take a picture of them and then show it to them and then they because looking in the mirror is different than if someone takes a picture of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. I actually did take a picture of my son doing that, and we were at a soccer game, and he was so hunched over looking at his phone. I'm like, look at what you're doing right now. Right?
That's a wrap for part one of my incredible conversation with Dr. Elisa Song. In part two, Dr. Song dives into practical strategies to help prevent chronic health issues in children. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
MacuHealth is a nutritional supplement leader. Our targeted formulas include MacuHealth for daily eye health, MacuHealth Plus for aging eye support, Vitreous Health for vitreous care, Vision Edge Pro for visual performance in athletes, TG Omega-3 for ocular and systemic wellness, and MacuHealth DM for eye and metabolic support. Call MacuHealth today and mention this podcast for special discounts. Experience the difference with MacuHealth. Nutrition you can see.
With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Do your patients know what presbyopia is?
There are people who are afraid of the press.
Have you talked to your patients about multifocal contact lenses?
I've heard the bifocal, but not
Right, exactly, not
multifocal.
multifocal.
Do you need help with your multifocal strategy? Learn more at the conclusion of this episode.